Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Meter Cute interviews here on Meter and Mayhem. This week, I'll be chatting with Claire Bateman, a writer who's taught at Clemson University, the Greenville Fine Arts Center, and various workshops and conferences. She's been awarded individual artist fellowships by the National Endowment for the Arts and the Tennessee Arts Commission, as well as she's received 2 Pushcart Prizes and the New Millennium Poetry Prize. She currently lives in Greenville, South Carolina, where in addition to writing, she also creates visual art. She's authored 9 poetry collections, most recently Wonders of the Invisible World, out from 42 Miles Press, and Scape, from New Issues Poetry and Prose. Her hybrid collection, The Pillow Museum, is forthcoming from FC2 Press in January of 2025. Want to know more about her work? Me too. So sit back, relax, and get ready to fall in love.
Hi, Jen. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm excited to be with you and to share some poems and conversation. I'm going to start with some poems from Wonders of the Invisible World, my book that came out in October with 42 Mile Press, thanks to David Dodley, an editor extraordinaire. And you should know his work too, everybody. It's very rich and it's very varied, and he's a visual artist too, in a number of genres, collage, painting. Okay, so I'm going to start with a title poem, which is the last poem in the book, and it's pretty long. And I might not read every section, but I'll see how it feels. Wonders of the Invisible World. 1. Doesn't everybody get a strange life? Don't we get to walk around inside ourselves all day long and sleep there through the whole night? Don't we have permanent access to the magnum and the minimum opus, the rising up and the sinking down? Aren't we granted the right to refrain from occupying more than one place at a time, from sharing the portable spaces we inhabit, from being in the least interchangeable? Doesn't it take all of our courage to be this but not that, no matter how incremental the distinctions in this world, where even the smallest entity is epic to itself, and objects go precisely to their own edges and then stop, or at least hesitate? Don't we all get the ocean and the idea of ocean, diffusion, resistance, and support, along with those in-your-face heavens of exponential blue, cumuli performing their high wire act as the wind releases its flayed and flaming exhalations? And consecutive failures, each more luminous than the last. Don't we get to drink deeply of the sun and grief and night and other voluminous bodies? And there's all this topiary profusion. And there are things that are discrete, things that overlap, things that can be left to themselves, and things requiring intermittent maintenance and repair. There are things which, once released from their containers, will never fit back in. There are things we've torn apart with our bare hands. A few of them are even visible. Here, where it's been arranged for us to be asynchronously lonely while we tingle with the temporal heebie-jeebies as though preparing to lift off with wings sutured together from the mangled remains of defective feathers. Up comes a small wind and the temperature begins to drop. Oh, bright wound of existence, so feral and ferociously shy. First wonder of the unseen world, are you God or just some kind of emissary? How chagrined we find ourselves that we couldn't have made you up. Nor water, whose work is to taste like nothing, nor air, whose work is to look like nothing, nor fire, whose work is to billow in the bloodstream, impersonating nothing, even as it burns. So that's the first section of a poem of many pages. And as you can see in this book, I'm kind of wrestling with some kind of philosophical, ontological, existential wonderings in a playful, slightly anguished, slightly playful, mostly curious way. And here's a kind of related poem. This is the first poem in the book, The New Loneliness. Remember how it was before thought balloons? A supercontinent of chaotic cognitive matter floating just above our heads, one huge lumpish murk? Remember the era before alphabets were sorted, hieroglyphics and cuneiform all jumbled together, characters resembling machine parts tangled with runes like forked and flaming branches? Remember life before quotation marks, when anything could be attributed to anyone, so there was never a distinction between generosity and return? The world is tidier these days. There's no limit to what we may accomplish now that each of us is equipped to take things personally. So I guess I do spend a lot of time writing and thinking about self and other, and why are we ourselves and not somebody else, which I'll talk about later. What is the how what separates us also connects us, but it always feels a little bit strange. This is a prose poem that was inspired when I thought about how I often have music in my head, and what if that were audible to everyone and everybody else's music was audible to me. Weathers. Where I come from, everyone's helpless against the aerial onslaught of other people's mental music, those melodic fragments that run on repeat loops through the brain. So before we venture out on a picnic, we check the index for our chosen location, and if there hasn't been enough wind to waft away harmonic residue, we seek an alternate spot. Before we close on a house, we scrutinize the notarized list of songs and musical passages that have accumulated there. Failure to disclose even one renders a contract void. Dating profiles feature each person's top 10, but there's no guarantee a couple's internal playlists won't evolve in opposite directions. Post-breakup, both partners still hum their ex's tunes, since music is sexually transmitted, no matter how much protection lovers afflict themselves with. A few people claim they can actually see the songs, that each possesses its own color configuration, some pale and translucent, others pulsing in primary hues. These individuals maneuver vigilantly through the streets, circumnavigating the currents, but the rest of us find ourselves continually ambushed by overlapping washes, as though we're slipping between radio stations every few seconds. It's certainly quieter in your country, where these auditory echoes remain trapped inside the individual mind. Your atmosphere seems stale, almost dimensionless, compared to that of my homeland, but your citizens are more volatile, reactive, prone to giving and taking offense, to aggression, litigation, every kind of strife. Such activities must serve as some kind of compensation for your predicament. With all that vacant space between you, you'll do anything to fill the air. And I think I'll read one more. It's also a prose poem from one of my former books, it's still a book, Clumsy, and that was with New Issues. Reprieve. The same day the same day the doctor confirmed my mother's pregnancy, he also informed her that she was carrying not one but two children, twins, one a human female, the other a pearl. They are chemically incompatible, he said. You must choose in favor of one, who will then absorb the other, or you will surely lose them both. Cruel dilemma for a woman who not only possessed a strong maternal instinct, but loved the beautiful and the mysterious as well. For the proverbial 3 days and 3 nights, she pondered, unable to make up her mind. Finally, however, as if to register my own opinion, I gave a feeble kick, a gossamer flutter, and that decided her. So dutifully, though with considerable sorrow, she began an intense course of the balancing medicine the doctor gave her, and my sister the pearl gradually weakened, finally dissolving into me. Had she been the one with fishy little arms and legs, in other words, had she been human and I a pearl, no doubt she'd have done the same thing, and I wouldn't have begrudged her this feeble gesture toward self-preservation, so I'm certain she experienced no rancor as she felt herself begin to come apart. Surely there are many aspects of my nature that can be explained only by her presence in my bloodstream. For instance, my acute sensitivity to sunlight. Any true pearl would sell the very soul she doesn't have for 5 minutes of shade. There's nothing a pearl detests more than daylight, In fact, she goes into a kind of hysterical coma in sunshine, recovering from her swoon only in the safety of her long, black velvet-lined box. I myself get migraines from glare, burn easily, and would, if permitted, permanently hibernate indoors. That's why all year round I wear enormous black sunglasses despite the ridicule of passers-by. Also, like a pearl, I am mostly a loner, and I tend to surround myself with loners, just as each pearl, pierced through by the same golden chain, basks in the luminescence of the others, even as she secretly believes she's the only one suspended there, and whines, "I'm so lonely." As for the differences between my sister and me, were you surprised when I mentioned that a pearl has no soul? It's true, you can test this for yourself. Candle her like an egg, and all you'll find is a cool cloudiness. Send X-rays through her with the most state-of-the-art layogram, and all you'll see is the telltale hexagonal pattern of dots designating the crystalline structure. Slice her in half, and all you'll discover is layer upon layer of aragonite. No true core at the center, only the original parasite or grain of sand. Not a soul, but an anomaly, an intrusion. Though come to think of it, a human soul does feel to its bearer, that is, to me, not unlike an irritation. So maybe in this aspect too, we are more alike than different. Very probably then I'm a pearl on the inside and a human on the outside, in which case my mother is not, as she has assumed all these years, guilty of my sister's death. For in choosing me, she saved both of us, and thus she can unshackle herself from the underwater rock where she has been doing penance all these years, her chin barely above the surface. Thank you.
Oh, Claire, that was amazing. Thank you for that great reading.
Thank you.
I loved how your work was both um physical experience, let's see if I can make sense. Physical experience, but also mental experience. That like as a reader listening, you feel like you're being sort of pulled along, like physically pulled along through the poem or the piece, and then you land those endings like
Thank you.
with the fire impersonating what is it, impersonating nothing even as it burns, like whoosh. Okay. I hope that made sense. It makes sense in my head. That that was great. Um, and it makes me curious because you read some newer stuff and you read some older stuff. Um, is there advice that you would want to give to yourself, not necessarily at the time that you were writing any of the stuff, but throughout your life? Is there any advice that you'd want to give to an earlier version of yourself?
I don't know if it's great advice, but I think I would say, because sometimes you just have to be focused in life on one or two things to accomplish what you want to accomplish. But looking back, I would say to my younger self, do stuff other than writing, and literary things. Like let writing be your side thing and become a stonemason or something like that, and learn more languages, and learn a musical instrument, and do things that are like non-literary related. Do more of those things. I don't know if that really is true to who I am, but it's the regret that I have, because now the older you get, the less time and energy you feel you have, and the more kind of focused you end up, because there's only so much thinness you can spread yourself into. um, but I would like to have more range. I think I sacrificed range for depth, and I'm happy with what I've written, but I can't help having some regrets.
Hmm. Huh.
Learn to be a pool shark. I don't know, something like that.
So if we hear of you being out in pool halls or off gambling
Yeah,
in Vegas, we'll know that you're expanding your range.
yeah. And also, I do visual art. I did expand into visual art, and that has given me great joy.
Um, how
Not,
long have
not
you
working,
been
not working with words, not working with narrative, just abstraction.
how
And I
long
guess
have you been doing visual art?
music is its own abstraction too, if there aren't lyrics. So I guess music, and I guess I should give myself, credit for having expanded in that way.
Yeah. How long have you been working in visual art?
well, let's see, probably 20 years or so. I haven't gotten super advanced, but I am happy with some of the things I've done. And I've played with different genres, just like paint, ink, collage.
Do you this is a weird question, but it's the question that always comes to my mind. Um, the differences between with writing, mistakes are very easy and sort of low cost. Um, do you feel more hesitant in your visual art, or are you able to just still let go even knowing that it uses the physical resources get used? How does
I think I navigate art by error itself. Like I'll make a mark and then another mark, and then the second mark doesn't look quite right. So I have to compensate for it in some way. And error by error and compensation by compensation, I, at least some of the time, I accomplish something that I wouldn't say that I planned or that I wanted, but that comes together out of accumulation of errors that I couldn't have predicted. But it is true that if I've been working on something for a really long time, an art piece, the more I work on it and the closer it is to being finished, the more anxious I get, because it is harder for me anyway. For if I were really an expert, I'd be able to like fix a mistake really easily, maybe. But the more I feel that I personally have the chance to ruin it all just by like a wrong stroke in the wrong, in a certain place that would be hard to cover over or compensate for. Early on, it's great because then you can just like play wildly. But toward the end, when you've got a certain kind of balance between shapes and colors and tones, it's harder.
that's
Harder.
interesting. It's interesting because it sounds similar, um, your advice to your younger self about sort of developing greater range and doing and trying a bunch of different things, and that as you get older, it sort of feels more costly and less easy to pivot
Mhm.
and things. So
That's true. That's very profound.
kind of because you said it, so that's
No, but you made the correlation,
yeah.
like the life correlation.
Yeah.
But we just have less room in our lives and less energy, and maybe fewer resources as time goes on.
Yeah. Um, if a younger version of yourself showed up, like had a time machine or something and knocked on your door, what advice do you think a younger version of yourself would give to you now?
I think she would say sternly, uh, and judgmentally, she would want me to unplug from the many devices that I'm connected to and try to get my attention span back in order to be able to spend hours playing with my journal, with writing, not having a definite outcome in mind, exploring, thinking, allowing myself to feel more empty, and um, purging myself of information and wanting to know what everybody else in the writing world is thinking about and doing. And it's tricky because I do love information. This is my journal, and it's kind of like you could kill somebody with it.
Oh, wow.
But I do like, I don't just mindlessly surf the web. I'm finding interesting things like, based on earthquake data, the solid inner core not only rotates, but appears to switch the direction of rotation relative to the mantle and crust every few decades. The inner core of the earth may also have a secret chamber. That may show up in a poem somewhere. And then I was reading about marine snow. It's like detritus from above and dead creatures, like particles of dead creatures and plant material, is constantly sifting downward to the bottom of the shore, to the bottom of the ocean floor. So it's this, and it feeds and enriches the lowest layer of the abyssal zone and so on. So that image of marine snow totally fascinates me, and I hope that I'll work with it sometimes too, or someday too. But I need to like, I'm too jumpy. I'm too checking email, checking information, checking what's going on. I need to cut back probably by about half.
Oh, that's that's um that's tough to do though.
Yeah,
Um, so is your journal sort of more like a commonplace book, or do you also write about this is
I
what
do
happened
write.
today
I
kind of?
write fragments. There was a period when I was doing a question and a statement every day, and I would like to get back to that. Like, where's the music coming from? I live in an apartment complex, and I've heard music, but I couldn't tell where it was. So, like, should I go knock on people's doors and find out where it's coming from? But then maybe they'll feel self-conscious and stop, and just, meditation, weird meditations like that, or whatever trivial or profound thing I'm thinking about, or what I notice in the world, or what's happening in the news, whatever. I have a lot of fragments, and I like to fold the fragments. When I'm writing something, I like to create a divergence that becomes a convergence later, by sifting through my many journals and seeing what can be kind of like folded into the mix to make the whole greater than the sum of its parts. So trusting the fragments was one of the most important lessons I discovered kind of accidentally as a writer and working with a journal.
Do you remember when you had that realization about trusting the fragments?
I don't remember, but I remember the feeling of it, of being excited that I don't have to start with a topic and stick to the topic, almost like the 5-star theme that you learn to write in high school, have your introduction, have your main body, well, and then have your conclusion where you say what you've said. There's kind of a poem version of that I was very happy to be released from.
Um, yeah. I'm trying to think with the poem version of that, if I was ever taught it or if we just sort of pick it up from reading all the other poems that are like that.
I think
Uh,
I was doing it when I was very new at poetry. I thought a poem had to be about a subject.
Um, I think for me, I studied with Mark Halliday, and then later I studied with David Kirby. So
Oh my.
yeah. So the concept of fragments and just following things wherever they go, I think I got that very well, not actually early in my writing because I went back to school sort of later. Um, but when I was in grad school, I definitely got a lot of that follow the fragments from them. So
And you can get a lot of microtones resonating against each other that way. Mark is a genius and David is also a genius. So I'm glad you worked with them.
yeah, they uh I got a lot I got a lot from working with them. I there were certain things that I gravitated towards that they did not like.
Like what?
Um, so I started work for a while there. I've been working with Annie Finch and doing metrical poetry. And so that has been nice. As sort of like a balance.
Mhm.
Um, and sort of working on these these very tight little poems.
And
Um,
those can be kind of incantatory.
yes, yeah. Um,
In fact, that was probably their original purpose.
I I think so, yeah. And Annie feels like trochees are sort of the most incantatory of all the meters.
Hmm.
Um, I I don't trochees are lovely. I'm not gonna have any trochee hate here. Um, but I don't gravitate easily towards them. Um, so so I don't know if my poems are as incantatory as they could be, but yeah, I've gotten back into meter. But having had the time with Mark and David, then I'm able to like I can make sense and still be in meter and know how to get a point across and how to clarify something within like 2 words. And I
Well,
think that
Your Ohio River flood poems are very trance-inducing, and
oh,
yet they have moments of humor and pathos and those microtones.
Thank you. That feels really good to hear someone thinking about my work.
Yeah.
I think.
And I heard you read them on in an interview. So it was wonderful. They're very conducive to hearing.
Thank you.
I tend to write page poems. And so when I do readings, I tend to read the same few over and over that are kind of reading poems, but really, I really think of my readership, whatever that is, as people just sitting quietly and reading them rather than an oral presentation.
Um, I feel like, well, at least the ones that you read today, I feel like they read very well because there is something, it isn't incantatory, but there's something that physically pulls the reader through them. And I think some of the ones on the page also have that same feeling, same vibe to them.
Thank you.
Uh, so I think I think that's cool. I remember because I was when you've been to OU a few times, I think,
Mhm.
as a reader. It was one of the times in probably like the late aughts is my guess, because that's when I was there, and I'm guessing um probably 2006-ish, 2007. Um, but I just remember that Mark kept describing your work as we're deeper.
As what?
We're deeper, so like
Huh.
weird but deep.
Huh.
And I was just always thinking like, why place those against each other? Why, I mean, like, of course it
Yeah.
could be both, right? Like,
Yeah, I really have been influenced by the speculative from watching Star Trek when I was a kid to reading science fiction, just to wondering about stuff.
yeah, and it shows in the piece that you read about the music, and also about the pearl, where the speculative is coming through in the poems.
And some of my favorite fiction writers are speculative, like Amy Bender and Kelly Link.
Um, so now my brain is like flooded with Amy Bender and Kelly Link stories, like all sort of mismatched. Um, because Amy Bender is the one that has the one where the boyfriend or husband is like slowly turning back.
Devolving, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
De-evolutionizing, that's not a word, devolving.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then he's like on the counter in a bowl near the end. Um, yeah, and I think there's a way to get to sort of the deeper human mysteries by letting yourself play with all those ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, have you ever seen Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist?
No, what is it?
It's a TV show. I think it got like 2 seasons, and the second season is super, super short, I think. Um, but the general concept, it's similar to your story, about the music, but um, less like in yours, it's sort of like the whole world is a certain way. And in her, or at least the whole country, in Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, she has an accident in an MRI machine, and it allows her to hear other people's emotions projected as song, but nobody else can hear it. Like, she's the only person and that can hear all these people, and like people will be doing these like huge musical dance numbers, and she's the only one that can see them.
That's great. What is it on? Where would I
it
find?
it was originally on NBC. um I'm guessing, I
I'll
think
look
it was
for it.
NBC. I'm guessing like Hulu or Peacock or some streaming service probably has it. It was only a few years ago. Um, I think I think it started either during the pandemic or right before, and it was sort of didn't quite get the viewership, but it was fabulous. If you like musical stuff and surreal stuff, it's a fabulous show. Speaking of things that you like, or that you might like, um, can you tell me about a writer or some writers who you're in love with? Like, whose stuff do you love?
Um, well, I was really my interest in kind of self and other and how why are we and not somebody else? All those questions. Elizabeth Bishop asked them in, I was blown away when I discovered this poem decades and decades ago, in the waiting room. I said to myself, 3 days and you'll be 7 years old. I was saying it to stop the sensation of falling off the round turning world into cold blue black space, but I felt you were you were an Elizabeth, you were one of them. And then later she says, and then she's thinking about the National Geographic pictures that she's seen of people in Africa that are so other and alien to her. And she said, why should I be my aunt or me or anyone? How I didn't know any word for it, how unlikely, how would I come to be here like them? And it goes on, and with the description of the waiting room and her aunt's cry of pain in the other room. And it kind of touches on the question of suffering, and when other people suffer, how are we connected to them? I mean, she doesn't like super unpack it, but she brushes against it in a way that I totally resonated when I read that. And I've also really been getting into, and here's my stack of books, prose poetry. So I really like Anne Carson. I've been reading Wrong Norma, and my favorite thing in it is a super long prose poem on the lecture on the history of skywriting. I think it's like 18 pages, and some of it's in Arabic, and it's a monologue, but it's just totally creative. And I've been reading this, Prose Poetry and Introduction, which is all about the theory of it and different kinds of it. And women's prose poetry is opposed to men, and neo-surrealism and open form and closure. But I realized that even though that's interesting, it's not ultimately, I think ultimately it's an intuitive thing rather than an analytical thing that draws me to prose poetry. And I had this quotation from Kathleen Rooney. She said she's drawn to prose poems that can't decide whether they want to be connective or disjunctive. And I totally love that, because that goes with the fragments, and it goes with the conflict between, or the tension between the tension between the one and the many, and the self and the other, which are kind of my obsessions. And I've also been influenced by comparatively early American prose poets like Michael Benedict, and Peter Johnson. And then Maggie Nelson's Bluets is a classic. Here's a book about women's prose poetry, Boxing Inside the Box by Holly Iglesias. And it's kind of transgressive in a great way. Nin Andrews, you should interview her. She's phenomenal. And she has a book coming out, but I think can't remember. I think it's prose poems. I think it's memoir and prose poems. Anyway, she has Why God is a Woman, which is also very speculative, long and mid-length prose poems. And then Mary Ruefle, she's kind of the goddess. Her essays read like prose poems to me, and I cannot get enough of them. Obviously, she's an amazing poet too, but listen to this from 22 Short Lectures. Short lecture on a problem. Every great poem has a problem, the problem of itself and how it got stuck in space, how it got wedged in this world, the problem of being in the first place. This is not a problem one wants to eradicate. This is a problem one wants to preserve and honor, even as it eternally frustrates one, unsolvable as it is. And then she has some more lyric ones. She's totally phenomenal. She's a force of nature, and there's nobody like Mary Ruefle. And strangely, I was writing something, a series of prose poems about my friends, that are, some of them are imagined and some of them are real. And then I saw that she had this long essay in the Georgia Review, which has since won a pushcart, I think, about her friends, very descriptive, and kind of lyric essay about her friends. So it's like, whoa, I feel awe that for that time we were on the same wavelength without my even knowing it.
Uh-huh.
So, and then Lydia Davis, I think Mary Ruefle perhaps was riffing on Lydia Davis, because she has her book Short Talks. I'm sorry, Anne Carson, Short Talks. And here's an example. And I don't even understand them all. And you don't have to. Short talk on shelter. You can write on a wall with a fish heart. It's because of the phosphorus. They eat it. There are shacks like that down along the river. I'm writing this to be as wrong as possible to you. Replace the door when you leave, it says. Now you tell me how wrong that is, how long it glows. Tell me. It's just a mysterious space. And here's another one, short talk on disappointments in music. Prokofiev was ill and could not attend the performance of his first piano sonata played by somebody else. He listened to it on the telephone. That's the whole piece.
Huh.
So we've got Ann Carson's short talks, and we've got Mary Ruppel's short lectures. And there's kind of a resonance between them, like an energy field. So those are some of the people that have moved me. And also, I just can't not mention this poem by Robert Penn Warren. It's been around a long time. And I think this is part of it. This isn't the whole thing. This part really speaks to our time. Tell me a story. In this century and moment of mania, tell me a story. Make it a story of great distance and starlight. The name of the story will be time, but you must not pronounce its name. Tell me a story of deep delight. I think that's what our hearts all want. We want a story of deep delight in this time of mania.
Amount of time. So thank you so much. I'm sorry
Thank
to cut us off,
you.
but thank you so much for coming and chatting with me today.
Thank you so much, and keep in touch.
Absolutely.
Okay.
What a fun interview that was. I hope you had anywhere near as much fun listening as I did talking. And I hope that you will head on out and get some of Claire's writing. You will enjoy it. I enjoy her writing quite a bit. I discovered it when I was in my master's program for creative writing, and have loved her work ever since, and just been a huge fan. So I hope that you all will check it out. And are we all going to go out and get those giant books for to keep our journals in? They were amazing. I need to ask her where she got them. I feel like I would very much feel like I was thinking good deep thoughts with one of those. They were just substantial and lovely. And we are in the Libra full moon cycle right now. Well, not full moon. It was full, now it's anyway, whatever. We're in the Libra cycle. Usually I don't keep up on such things. I just happen to know this right now. And apparently that's like all about, not all about, but involves beauty and aesthetics and fine things. And I feel like the Libra rising in me wants one of those giant books. But the practical side of me says I have nowhere to put a book that substantial, and probably not thoughts cool enough to put in such a book, right? I'm gonna stick to my little things I buy at Publix, or beginning of the school year at Target. I just buy a whole bunch of spiral bounds. The Libra rising cringes. I don't know why I'm talking about astrology right now. I have no idea. Thanks for stopping by.